It is 3 in the morning in a quiet, highly affluent residential neighborhood in Luxembourg. The year is 1990. The streets are empty. Behind the heavy oak door of a luxury apartment, a man is awake. His name is Franklin Jurado. He holds a degree in economics from Harvard University, and he is currently managing the European wealth of the Cali cartel. Jurado has built a masterpiece of financial architecture. He has successfully moved tens of millions of dollars through a labyrinth of more than 100 European bank accounts. He has layered the funds through holding companies, structured the deposits to navigate around automated warnings, and utilized his elite education to outmaneuver the compliance frameworks of the Western banking sector.
But inside the apartment, there is a sound. It is a low, rhythmic, mechanical whirring. It is a cash-counting machine. The physical reality of the street-level currency is simply too vast and too tedious to process by hand. The machine hums endlessly into the early hours of the morning. In the apartment next door, a neighbor is trying to sleep. The neighbor does not know what a cartel is, nor do they care about global capital flows. They are just frustrated by the noise. The neighbor picks up the telephone and calls the local police. When authorities arrive to ask Jurado to lower the volume, they do not find a loud television. They find the architect of a massive financial network, sitting in a room surrounded by currency. A routine noise inquiry leads to wiretaps. The wiretaps eventually unravel the entire 100-account network. The man who navigated the complexities of the international banking system is brought down by the hum of a noisy motor. We are often told a very specific story about how dirty money works. We are told the term money laundering was coined by Al Capone because he used actual laundromats to mix his illicit cash with legitimate coins. It is a cinematic origin story, but it is a myth. Capone used cash-heavy businesses, but the phrase money laundering did not officially appear in print until 1973. It was used by journalists during the Watergate scandal to describe how political campaign contributions were routed through Mexico to obscure their origin. The term was popularized to describe political concealment, not street crime. And that distinction is the key to understanding how modern financial networks actually operate. Today, global financial institutions spend enormous sums annually on compliance software, analysts, and reporting protocols. Yet illicit finance remains notoriously difficult to intercept and recover. We often imagine money laundering as a purely criminal enterprise, operating entirely in the shadows. But modern money laundering succeeds not only through criminal sophistication, it succeeds through the staggering complexity, speed, incentives, and fragmentation of the legitimate economy. The deeper question is not how criminals hide. The question is how dirty money disappears inside legitimate economic activity. Moving illicit capital often requires breaking it down into unrecognizable fragments. Look at a university dormitory in Shenzhen, China. It is late in the evening. An engineering student is lying on his bed, looking at his smartphone. He is not a criminal operative. He is just a student who needs extra spending money. He logs into a FinCEN platform, which translates to running points. With the press of a button, he temporarily rents out his personal WeChat Pay or Alipay QR code to a third-party service. For the next few hours, small, seemingly random deposits appear in his digital wallet. 50 yuan here, 100 yuan there. The platform immediately transfers that money out, passing it along to another destination. For allowing his account to be used as a temporary bridge, the student receives a tiny commission. Upstream criminal networks, managing funds from illegal gambling, extortion, or scams, take massive pools of illicit money and atomize them. They distribute the risk across thousands of ordinary, low-balance personal accounts. The money cascades through the smartphones of ordinary citizens, blending into the infinite daily white noise of the digital economy. It looks like friends splitting dinner bills or buying subway tickets. The algorithmic security frameworks are designed to look for spikes and massive, unexplained wealth transfers. They struggle to detect a student receiving a few dollars on a Tuesday night. But the digital economy is only one side of the ledger. Eventually, digital fractions must reconcile with physical reality, and physical cash has weight.
Walk into a currency exchange office in London in the year 2010. A businessman approaches the glass partition and slides a slim leather laptop bag across the counter. The teller unzips the bag. Inside is 1 million euros. It is entirely composed of 500 euro banknotes. If this man had brought $1 million in standard American $100 bills, it would have weighed roughly 22 kilograms. It would have required a large, conspicuous suitcase. But €1 million in 500 euro notes weighs just over 2 kilograms. High value per note equals lower physical bulk. At the time, investigations by UK authorities suggested that a vast majority of these high-denomination notes circulating in the country were tied to the shadow economy. The bill was practically useless for normal commerce. Grocery stores rarely accepted it. Its primary functional purpose was to compress the physical footprint of illicit wealth, making it easier to transport across borders. The realization prompted UK currency wholesalers to stop supplying the note altogether.
When criminal networks cannot compress their cash into high-denomination notes, they are left with a staggering logistical problem: warehouses of low-denomination bills. Money that cannot be deposited into a bank without triggering immediate suspicion. To solve this, the cash must enter legitimate commerce. Imagine a bustling commercial warehouse district in Miami. An electronics wholesaler is looking at his inventory. He has 2,000 refrigerators sitting in his lot. A broker walks through his door. The broker says he represents a buyer in Colombia who wants to purchase the entire lot of appliances. The wholesaler agrees to the price. The next day, the broker delivers the payment in physical American cash. It is street-level currency. The refrigerators are loaded onto a cargo ship bound for South America. When they arrive in Colombia, a legitimate local appliance store buys them from the broker, paying in clean, highly traceable Colombian pesos. The broker takes those clean pesos and hands them to the cartel. This is the black market peso exchange. The illicit US dollars never crossed the border. They never entered a wire transfer. They were simply used to purchase retail goods. The Miami wholesaler may not know he is facilitating a laundering operation. He is focused on moving inventory and hitting his quarterly targets. The incentive to make a large sale often outweighs the desire to ask aggressive questions about the source of the physical cash. This trade-based architecture is not limited to home appliances. Consider the network orchestrated by Ayman Juma, which moved staggering volumes of capital for Latin American cartels and other organizations. His operatives purchased tens of thousands of used cars from legitimate dealerships across the American Midwest and East Coast. The vehicles were shipped to massive, dusty parking lots in Cotonou, Benin, in West Africa. Buyers purchased the cars for cash, and that cash was subsequently smuggled into Lebanon and deposited into exchange houses. The cars were the currency. The American car dealers were not necessarily cartel members. They were salesmen. The infrastructure of global trade relies on people willing to process the transaction, file the paperwork, and move on to the next customer. Bureaucratic inertia is the silent engine of the laundering machine. Eventually, however, illicit capital must transition from physical goods back into the regulated financial sector, and that requires human intermediaries. In May of 1998, the desert heat beats down on the neon lights of Mesquite, Nevada. Inside a luxury casino, 22 bankers from Mexico and Venezuela are wearing tailored suits, smoking cigars, and drinking champagne. They have flown into the United States on private invitations to attend a highly exclusive financial conference. The invitations promised VIP treatment and a celebration of their successful banking relationships. They are men who help move capital for major cartels. As they raise their glasses, the doors swing open. The executives who sent the invitations are undercover agents for U.S. Customs. This was Operation Casablanca, one of the most ambitious money laundering stings of its era. The investigators did not simply trace wire transfers. They built trust. They created a facade of legitimate banking architecture, exploiting the confidence of intermediaries who felt insulated from the violence of the street. It demonstrated that financial networks are ultimately secured not by algorithms,
but by human relationships.
But even willing bankers face the friction of sovereign borders and geopolitical controls. Look across the Pacific to Macau. A wealthy businessman from mainland China sits in a private VIP room at a casino. He faces a strict regulatory environment. The Chinese government imposes hard limits on the amount of capital a citizen can transfer out of the country annually. He bypasses the bank wire entirely. Before leaving the mainland, he deposits funds with a shadow bank. Upon arriving in Macau, a VIP junket operator hands him the equivalent amount in dead chips, non-negotiable casino tokens that can only be used for gambling. He sits at a baccarat table, a game with an incredibly low house edge. He cycles through the chips, hand after hand. When he wins, he is paid in standard, transferable casino chips. At the end of the night, he takes the transferable chips to the cage and requests a payout in Hong Kong dollars or US currency. The structure exploits the gap between sovereign financial controls and casino gaming mechanics, utilizing the natural flow of the casino floor as a clearinghouse. For capital that has already crossed borders, the objective shifts from movement to preservation. And preservation often requires the purchase of physical assets through opaque corporate structures. For decades, certain jurisdictions within the United States offered corporate secrecy laws that were highly attractive to foreign capital. An anonymous LLC allows an individual to open bank accounts, transfer funds, and purchase assets without exposing their true identity to the public. Legitimate businesses use these structures every day for privacy and liability protection. But that same opacity can be leveraged to obscure the origin of illicit funds. Look at the luxury glass condominiums of Miami and Manhattan. In 2016, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, known as FinCEN, issued a geographic targeting order. The directive was simple. If a corporate entity wanted to buy luxury real estate in those specific markets entirely in cash, the title insurance company was legally required to record the name of the true human being, the beneficial owner behind the company. The government did not ban cash purchases. They merely asked for a name on a piece of paper. Following the order, corporate all-cash purchases in those targeted luxury markets dropped substantially. The data strongly suggested that a significant segment of the luxury housing market heavily valued absolute anonymity. When required to step into the light, that capital retreated. Yet, no matter how much wealth is parked in concrete and steel, the arteries of the global economy are ultimately controlled by major financial institutions. In 1999, a mid-level vice president at the Bank of New York named Lucy Edwards processed the paperwork for standard commercial accounts in Queens, New York. Over the next few years, billions of dollars in Russian capital flight moved through those accounts. It was not a highly sophisticated cyber intrusion. It was high-volume commercial banking operating with weak beneficial ownership verification. The bank processed the transactions because the accounts appeared to be standard corporate entities. The vulnerabilities exposed in the 1990s led to sweeping new regulations, but the core tension within banking remained unresolved. Between 2007 and 2015, a tiny branch of Danske Bank in Tallinn, Estonia, processed staggering volumes of suspicious wealth, primarily from Russia and former Soviet states. A British trading desk employee named Howard Wilkinson began noticing severe anomalies. A UK-registered shell company named Lantana Trade LLP was moving massive volumes of money through the branch daily, despite reporting zero revenue on its official UK filings.
The underlying issue was not just a failure of compliance software. The Estonian branch generated substantial revenue for the parent bank. This created a difficult conflict between commercial incentives and effective scrutiny. When a division is highly profitable, aggressive internal investigations become culturally difficult. The inertia of profit often outpaces the mandate for compliance. When this tension scales from corporate profit to geopolitical strategy, the mathematics of evasion ascend to the sovereign level. In the mid-2010s, the United States enforced severe economic sanctions on Iran, heavily restricting its access to the global financial system. A businessman named Reza Zarrab utilized a humanitarian exemption in the sanctions regime, which legally permitted trade with Iran for food and medical supplies. Zarrab generated highly detailed customs paperwork, documenting massive shipments of wheat moving toward Iran. In exchange, frozen Iranian funds held in Turkish banks were released to pay for this aid.
But the physical reality did not match the ledger. Zarab later testified in a U.S. federal court that the shipments were fabricated. He stated under oath that the sheer volume of wheat claimed on the customs manifests was physically impossible for the listed ships to carry. Nobody checked the physical boats. They only checked the paperwork. The infrastructure of global trade was weaponized on paper, facilitating the movement of billions of dollars.
But navigating these complex, overlapping layers of the global economy carries an inherent physical risk. When the architecture fails, the consequences are rarely confined to a courtroom. In June 1982, a postman walking across Blackfriars Bridge in London looked down toward the River Thames. Hanging from the scaffolding was the body of Roberto Calvi. Calvi was the chairman of Banco Ambrosiano, one of the most prominent private banks in Italy. He had established deep financial ties with the Vatican Bank, navigating an opaque network of offshore ghost companies in Latin America. When a massive deficit was discovered in his ledgers, the network collapsed. Calvi fled to London. Days later, he was found hanging under the bridge, his pockets filled with heavy bricks and physical cash. While initially ruled a suicide by local authorities, later investigations treated his death as a calculated assassination. The shadow economy relies on anonymity, but it aggressively enforces its debts. We often view money laundering as an external threat, a virus trying to breach a firewall. But the reality is far more complex and far more unsettling. Illicit finance survives because legitimate economies are designed to move enormous amounts of money quickly and efficiently. Banks, retail supply chains, property markets, and global trade networks are optimized for speed, volume, and seamless execution.
The very infrastructure that makes global commerce possible provides the cover needed to disguise illicit wealth. A system does not require every participant to be corrupt. It only requires enough people to process the invoice, close the sale, and clear the transaction without looking too closely. A financial ledger is engineered to tell you exactly where a dollar is. It was never designed to tell you what that dollar has done.